Good evening, good evening, good evening to the technological nightmare of nightmares. It's the Thursday night American Scouser podcast TV show extravaganza with me, the guy who's using two computers to make this whole thing work, possibly three if we can get a calculator in, and Gary and Brian Shelton as well. How are we, boys?
Doing great.
I mean, we're doing well now. I mean, we're at least up and running. Sorry to everyone that we're 13 minutes late. I bet Alan Walnut probably thinks we died.
I'm blaming Bill Gates. That's all I'm doing. I'm trying to blame Bill Gates for everything. Tonight's show on ASTV, as the cool kids call it. We'll be talking about the West Ham game, of course. We'll talk a little bit about Frank Lampard because it's just fun to do that. And we look ahead to the weekend. And then if we have time, which we probably won't, but we'll get the threshold question in, and also the EPL fantasy shows on straight after us, so make sure you're staying tuned in for that. But first, before anything, as we all know, there's the tragedy of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. The effects are still being felt to this day, and we have on the American Scouser TV, we have an auction and a campaign to raise funds so that we can help save the children out there, because they are the most vulnerable people. If you are subscribed to our Facebook page or Instagram or Discord, our Twitter account, you'll have seen the pleas for help that we've put out there. So just a reminder, I think it's 2 days left for the auction, the silent auction.
Yep, we still have the silent auction. Silent auction with some great items. We also do have if you don't feel like bidding on any of the items in the auction and would prefer to just make a monetary contribution, we have a account set up as well for that. I'm going to go grab the links and I'll post them to the chat throughout the session. But please, anything helps, whether it's $1, $5, if you can do more, we'd really appreciate it. But really check out the items in the silent auction. There's a couple really good little steals in there. There's some cool garb, some nice swag. So you can get out, rep Liverpool, and at the same time support a really, really great cause, because the children of Turkey and Syria really need this, and all the money and proceeds are going right over there. And I'll also post a link. We have a video of an interview that we've done where Timuchin did an interview with some of the folks that are like, and I just think it really hits home when you hear the struggles that they're going through. And I know it was big news for like 72 hours, and then something worse happened somewhere else, and it just kind of gets swept under the rug over here. But this one hits home for us, and as Liverpool supporters, I'd love to see us all put together and really make a push to get us up closer to our goals and raise the funds up. So let's get that out there. And if you can't make a contribution or bid on an item, do us a favor and share it personally to your Facebook page, share it to local Liverpool groups, your supporters group. Please share the post, share the link with folks, because the more eyeballs that get on it, the better opportunities there are to raise money. So I'll go find some of those links while you queue up our first topic, other than just don't go to the Lampard stuff, because I got some good jokes.
Just to add to that, because we have some clips floating around from that interview, but one of the good points that was made is, if you can't give $100, say, getting 9 other people to give $10 will give us exactly the same amount we need. So the more we spread the word, the better we can do, and hopefully we can go beyond the expectations and help the people that need the help. But we will continue on with the topic of the week. For us, at least as Liverpool fans, is we had a good game against West Ham, a good evolution of that role for Trent. Still conceding goals like it's going out of fashion though. So, Brian, what did you think of the game this week? And what did you see that you may have liked going forward from what is your new plan?
To me, it's Cody Gakpo. I mean, he's just turning it on over this past couple of matches right there. I think that if we can say we found a Bobby Firmino replacement right there, even though he's irreplaceable, we found one. I think that Trent now is pushing 51 assists now. That was his 51st in this past match. I think this new role is kind of like this inverted fullback is like really setting him, getting his confidence going. He seems like he's a little bit more ready to play the match now than he was a couple weeks ago, where it was like a bunch of sulking and and getting subbed off right there or there. I think those are my big high points. My low point right there is probably Verge. The goal that we conceded, I was lost with it with the whole ducking out of place kind of thing that he was trying to do. It was pretty rough.
Gally, it's a point we've made before on the Thursday show. Is that there is almost a palpable downward trajectory for Virgil van Dijk right now, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been seeing it slowly. I think at points last season we saw a real decline, but we chalked it up to coming back from a really bad injury, and it takes time. And as time went on, there were moments last year, I think we talked about it ad nauseum. There was a first half of the season where Matip was really the best defender at the club. Second half of the season, you could argue Konate was the best defender at the club. And the only consistent thing was that Virgil got to play every day alongside both of them. And then we come back this year. Hopefully we'll get Virgil back. And the real question was, does Matip keep the form going in the second half? Does Matip win it back? Maybe even Joe Gomez comes up and shows up. But ultimately, I think what we've seen is there's been a decline. And I think when you play a game the way that Virgil plays, it makes things difficult for you when some of that speed and the quick twitch and his basic instincts stop helping him out. And I think that was a big part of his game. And I think he now, it used to be he was like a Rolls Royce and suave. And now, honestly, he looks like an arrogant guy in a Lexus.
In terms of we kind of saw, we've spoken about Konate, as we said, like being probably the best defender right now. But that, again, like that kind of shows that really is the case now, isn't it? We should be looking to partner Konate rather than find a partner for Virgil, don't you think, Brian?
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing my problem with Konate right there is his fitness at the moment. I mean, so he had a whole good consistent run of matches, but I mean, it seems like he's still iffy with as far as like his injury prone, and I'm still kind of on the fence about that right there. But I do think he's the best defender we have at the moment.
In terms of the Trent role, Gali, it's taken a bit of time to bed in. But what I noticed was, especially in the two games that he's excelled in, it's almost like we've returned to those long balls, those kind of that we've kind of missed a little bit, I thought, especially with Thiago in and out and in and out. But those little dinked passes over the top for players to run onto, especially with Gakpo creating the space by dropping back in and playing the Bobby role. We've been a bit too tippy-tappy at times, I think, this season, but that job kind of suits his passing range, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, he's looked so good, and it's amazing what happens because he's looked better defending when he's been asked to defend. And I think you see the confidence when he feels like a big part of the attack and of the offense. And if he's not, I almost wonder if the tactics we were playing earlier in the year, and this is not an excuse for him because he's been dreadful at times, but I almost wonder if like the tactics he had were that he was so weakened by not being a big part of the offense that he just lost all confidence, and then it affected his defending. It affected his decision making. It affected his positional awareness, which, anyone who listens on Monday knows that, we get on him for not being in the right places at the right time. And that's most of his mistakes. Where I think in this instance, he's just looked like he's just more engaged in the game overall. And that allows him to stay in the flow. And I think then he doesn't check off. And it doesn't have him really getting kind of embarrassed, because at times this year he was ultimately getting embarrassed.
Brian, in terms of, like we've talked about it before, there's players that we call confidence players. Is it kind of obvious now, and maybe we weren't seeing it before as supporters, or maybe even Klopp wasn't seeing it, but that Trent really is a confidence player, and if he feels almost like at least one of the main men on the team, then he plays better. Whereas if he's kind of hidden off in that defensive role, it damages his confidence in terms of what he believes he can do to impact the team.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you can tell just by the way, by his movement and all that. You see that, like I always talk about him going back and defending, his clearance that he made in the second half right there on the ball right there. I mean, you can tell that he lifts the team up right there. So you do see a future captain out of him in that aspect right there, which is what we've all been wanting. I mean, he's the dream of every Liverpool kid to come there and actually go up and captain your side. I mean, so I definitely think that he's on the excel, and I think this is probably the best position we've ever found for him.
Gally, moving kind of a little bit forward, like let's talk about Gakpo because I've liked him since he started. Me and Jamie used to talk about him. Jamie had a good insight into how he played. We've been looking for that Firmino replacement. Gakpo comes in and he starts around about the left-hand side, and we're kind of figuring out where he's going to be. Then he's a number 9, kind of figuring out where he's going to be. But it's almost just give him the freedom of the field and he'll do the damage, isn't it?
Yeah, his movement is so good. You actually see the intelligence that he has, and I think that was something that was a lot talked about of him as this like really mature player. I know Klopp likes to say like he's 23 years old and was captaining his club side, like playing for a title. Like that's not an easy thing to do at that age. But then he got him in, started training with him, and realized, wow, the kid's really well beyond his years. I think he's adapted. He has taken to this system as well as anyone could. And, we raved last season, right, about Luis Diaz just showing up and basically within a week was Liverpool's best player. And that was our best player till the Champions League final. And almost single-handedly kind of helped will us across the line for last season. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what Gakpo's done here. Gakpo's done 2 major things. One, he's allowed for another season of Bobby being broken down for most of the year and not available. He's mitigated that. And 2, he's taken an enormous, not all, but an enormous amount of the pressure off of Nunez that would be there right now if Nunez was basically required to bag the goals along with Salah that whole time while Jota, Diaz, and Bobby were unfit. Gakpo's, we all kind of complained, right, that we didn't buy a midfielder and we bought another bleeping attacker, and not only an attacker, another left-sided attacker. But we needed that player probably more than anyone. And I think we go into next season, I would probably argue that Gakpo is probably the 4th or 5th most important player coming into next season if we're going to kick on and get back to fighting for real honors.
Brian, Gally touched on there, but Nunez, he hasn't started the last 2 games, if I remember correctly, if not more. Do you think there's something to be said for that? Is he still suffering from the shoulder injury, or are we just kind of maybe Klopp taking Nunez out of Gakpo's way, so Gakpo, like, they're not competing with each other for the same spaces?
I just think it's tactics. I mean, honestly, right there, I think that the what Nunez does and what Gakpo does are 2 different opposite is the spectrum. I mean, Nunez is more of a run at you and kind of like a mix of a Diaz but a stronger version in the middle. Where Gakpo right there is a more like in a Bobby role, where I don't think that they coincide correctly. I mean, so I think it's more tactics than anything. I think that Nunez coming off the bench right there has been great. I mean, he's done his job. He's pressured their defense right there, and especially when you have leads, have the lead right there, where he's keeping them on their toes right there instead of actually going and trying to hit us on the counter.
Gally, do you think there's like always a thing in team sports, like players that may not necessarily always be the focal point, but they're almost the catalysts for everybody else to have a good game. And it seems like Salah's had a second wind this season since Gakpo's started to play that role. Jota looks like he's back to where he was pre-injury since Gakpo started playing that role. Is that kind of, do you think the way Gakpo plays the game is freeing up those players to you know to play to their full extent without worrying about having to do something else on top of the jobs they're doing?
I do. I think honestly, it's the closest thing we've had to an active Bobby. One. And two, I think that in some ways, Gakpo has made our weakened and porous midfield seem just a little bit more stable because he drops back in and he helps out a little bit more. He presses well and he presses at the right time. And I think at times that's where I know Timuchin has mentioned this in our Discord channels. You know, at times Darwin looks like he is absolutely playing his own game and everyone else is playing something else. When he presses, when he doesn't press, when he drops off. So I really believe that has made the midfield better.
In terms of look, Brian, look, just talking about that additive concept. To me, Mane was that player for such a long time. Like, you know, if Mane had a good game, everybody had a good game, and Mane almost always had a good game. If Gally says, you know, he does plug in that link gap between the defense and the attack, Gakpo does that make the midfield retooling for next season a little bit easier?
Yes and no. I mean, I still think that we desperately need a holding midfielder. I mean, that's like especially if we're going to still stick around, have Verge around right there with that defense right there. There needs to be a strong holding midfielder. I think that we do have. I think we have some of the midfielders that we need. Just as age, it's this retooling. I think that Curtis Jones has actually come across has stepped up a lot. I mean, he's kept Harvey Elliott, which, you know, I still think is probably a little bit too young to actually have that much of an impact role. But I do think it might be a little bit easier right there to actually, you know, bring in like a Mason Mount if that's what we want to do, or somebody, you know, to actually cover to stop gap with it. I think that we still have at least another year out of Thiago, but I think the ones right here with Henderson and Milner are the ones that are most concerned, that you have to figure out how you're going to recycle those guys out.
In terms of the overall score, was 2-1 fair to us, or was David Moyes justified in his whining and moaning and trashing about the failed penalty to be given, Gally?
I mean, it was a bet. I do think it was a penalty. But yes. I feel like there are a lot of opportunities where that happens all the time. Like, we've seen it happen. Should it have been given? I think it should have. There were a couple other dicey calls throughout the match that could have went different ways and maybe changed things. I thought that, I forget who on their side got the yellow in the first half and maybe could have picked up a second one, and he kind of gave him a little pass. Because it was right after like the 45th or 50th minute, like right after the half started. So I kind of was, listen, refereeing decisions go each way. Managers are going to whine, especially ones that are down near relegation zone. He wouldn't be representing his players if he didn't shout that was a penalty and we deserved it at home. You know, this isn't Liverpool going for the title. This is Liverpool in 8th place. Like, come on, you know, get over this. And it didn't work out, and we got a little lucky, and, you know, the Giraffe scores the big goal, and let's be honest, 3/4 of the world was watching Man City versus Arsenal anyways.
Just on that, before we transition from the tragedy of our season to the comedy of the next topic, for anybody who hasn't noticed, that Peacock now has a thing called the data zone or something like that, where you can watch the games with a lot of data going on, and a nice little player tracker in the bottom corner. One of the best things I've ever seen in soccer since I started watching soccer. That's what we wanted American coverage to look like. Feed us nerds all the data we want whilst watching the game. So if Peacock wants to give us some money for plugging that, please feel free to do so. We won't object. So moving on, because it's nice to have a bit of a laugh, because it involves Everton for one, and it also involves Chelsea. Frank Lampard, he's a bit of a talentless no-mark manager, really, isn't he, Gally?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I have to be honest. I am really enjoying Everton's demise. There is a part of me that's a little sad in some levels. I know, like, Kazi's getting mad at me already because he thinks I'm on his side, and I am. I could care less if they're relegated. But it's so bad. I mean, it's embarrassingly bad. It got so bad you fired Frank Lampard and replaced him with Sean Dyche. I mean, honestly, you really hate your supporters and you hate everyone that loves your club. If you're like your response to a mistake like Frank Lampard is to then put those supporters through 4.5 months of Sean Dyche. I mean, it's just absolutely miserable. But the only thing better than the Everton demise is living vicariously through the Schadenfreude shit show that is Chelsea Football Club. Because this is a club who fired a manager who had won the Champions League to hire a nobody, keep the nobody around for 2 extra months, let him spend another 100 million, not give him time, keep telling everyone you're going to keep him, and then replace him with Frank Lampard, which is arguably the worst thing you could have done because you needed to bring in, like, well, who's the guy they bring in every year when they fire the manager? Was it Gus Henkes or whatever? They go get the guy. Right, yeah, Gus Hiddink, right? They bring him in. He would just come in. He'd be like, hey, guys, guess what? We're playing 4-3-3. I'm smoking butts, and I ain't coming to training. That's what we're doing. Just don't freaking embarrass me, all right? But then if you had an adult in the room, you would be able to assess the 355 players under contract for the next 12 years. Instead, you literally bring in Frank Lampard. You've actually hurt Lampard. Like, I didn't think he could be more. I didn't think his stock could get any lower. That dude is worth less. He is worth like less than crypto is right now. Like, you'd have a better chance trading crypto than getting Frank Lampard a job. Like, Frank Lampard couldn't get a job at a junior varsity, like, youth side here in the States at this point. Because they'd probably be like, nah, I saw that son of a bitch steal money when he played for New York City FC.
Brian, my bugbear has always been on this show about and I've talked a little bit about maybe on the Discord channels about the impression that ex-players are going to make great managers, but Frank Lampard really is the example of how that just is not true, isn't he?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, so is Steven Gerrard too, right there with that Aston Villa side. I mean, you can see the difference right there between how he came through, stepped up from there. Hey, maybe Frank Lampard could go up to Scotland right there. It seems like everybody can win shit there,
except for Neil Lennon.
Except for Neil.
Well, it's not that easy, but at least Steven Gerrard can say, "I've got a trophy." Frank Lampard probably couldn't win the Trenton under-12s tournament this weekend if he tried, could he?
No, but also right there, just the amount of talent that they have there. I mean, they're doing. I mean, I'm so glad that we avoided Enzo because I don't even know what they paid that 100 million for because he's not good. I mean, it's his movement's not good, his tracking's not good, so it's like he was probably beyond a step. He probably should stay where he was at.
In terms of the overall picture at Chelsea, Gally, Todd Bowley has been an absolute disaster for them so far, hasn't he? And will probably continue to be so. Are they the next Leeds?
I don't think they're the next Leeds because as bad as Bowley has been, he wasn't great. He wasn't great at the beginning. He wasn't great at the beginning when he took over the Dodgers either, and he did a lot of the similar things. But eventually, he will hire football people to run football operations, just like he hired baseball people to run baseball operations. And because he has money and he's in a huge market, and people want to live in London, like the club isn't like getting moved to the Midlands. It's just it's a big difference, and you know that, I know that people want to play in that. You know, they are considered, you know, the last 10 years a big club across Europe. They've won all the honors and all the trophies, and honestly, I think the move is about the manager. If all reports are out there right now, it sounds like Pochettino's basically it's done. He's coming in, and I mean, he's proven already that he can coach. So for me, I don't know. I think that's a good hire. I don't dislike that hire. If he didn't go to Chelsea, he's going to Real Madrid to replace Carlo Ancelotti when he goes to Brazil in the offseason. So I mean, he was getting a top job. He'll probably be able to bring in a player or two. You know, it's going to take some time. It's going to take windows. They need to sell players. But I found the comical thing was Pochettino's like number one ask is he wants Lukaku back. But it actually makes sense because the thing is they've spent $1 billion. They spent $500 million over the last 3 transfer windows and haven't solved their one problem that the best striker in their club plays in Italy.
Brian, if you're a Chelsea fan, are you looking at this with the whole situation with embarrassment and cringe, or are you looking at it with a little bit of worry, or do you think, as Gali says, you kind of ride it out and you realize that it has to get better at some point?
You have to just ride it out. That's it. We just have to. I mean, with them, they have to definitely get rid of a lot. I mean, of players right there to tweak themselves back down to a sizable thing. I mean, Kai Havertz right there, and doesn't do anything for them. I mean, so you have to tone your tools down right there to actually get a good side together. But Pochettino right there, I'm really not that sold on Pochettino. I mean, I think that he did a decent job with the Daniel Levy Spurs side, and I mean, he did okay with PSG and stuff like that. But I think that really. Honestly, if I was Chelsea, I'd have probably gone young and gone with Nagelsmann, but that's just me.
He turned him down.
Quite right. Gali, just on the Pochettino thing, because I think he's a fantastic coach, but not necessarily a winner, if that makes any sense. Wasn't he not the manager at PSG when Lille won the title over them, which really should be, if he was that manager, that's a shocking thing to have happened here, really, isn't it?
He was, but Mbappe played in 35% of the league games, and Neymar played in 80% of them, which automatically starts to hurt you in the opposite favor. I think if he had gotten this year's team and had Neymar out all season, he also had to integrate Messi in his first year. That was set up to fail. I thought it was a terrible decision in his part to take that job. I don't think he wanted to take the United job. And ultimately but he wanted to work again. And there's only so many jobs you can take. And I think this is a job that you don't say no to at the money they're going to pay him. I think he's a fantastic coach, shown in the fact that he got Southampton into Europe, same Southampton that's about to be relegated with similar team. I think it's a little harsh to say he was like terrible at Spurs when he took a Spurs team to the Champions League final. And I think a League Cup and an FA Cup final. I know they didn't win them, but they played City twice and Liverpool. I mean, they played big clubs in those finals. So, and they were they've been a top 4 team. I think it's 8 of the last 9 seasons. So, and Pochettino really built that. And plus, I'll say this, he clearly has an eye for talent because he's the guy who gave Harry Kane his first ever start. And he's the guy who arguably oversaw maybe the greatest striker in Premier League history kind of moved to prominence. So I think we're being a little harsh on him. And I think if my team was filled with Mudryks and, Reece James's and young talent like Chelsea has been acquiring, the Fofana kid, the other Fofana kid, I think having a guy like Pochettino, if you're going to give him 2-3 years to work with a crop of players, he might turn that Mudryk kid into an absolute world beater. So I think he's actually the right hire for Chelsea. Now the question is, they thought Graham Potter was, so will they give him enough time to prove whether he is or not? Or will they just do what they always do, break the goddamn panic button and call Fat Frank?
I think that's always a good thing to be able to laugh at, because he will be what Roy Hodgson is apparently to Crystal Palace. They'll call him up when he's 80 years old, and he still won't know how to win a game. But he'll have won some trophies for Chelsea, and that's all that matters. But talking about Pochettino gives us a nice little segue for the last item of the night for the soccer discussion, at least. We play Spurs this coming weekend. They had a good result today, coming back from behind from 2-0 down against United. But they've had a horrifically bad season from what their previous standards under said Pochettino manager, and even maybe to an extent Mourinho. Are we catching them at a bad time or a good time, Brian?
I think we're catching them at a good time. Honestly, I think that above us right there, really the team that's on form right there is Villa. I mean, the Villa's on like on an amazing run right there. I think we can easily catch and pass Spurs and without an issue. I think the biggest battle is going to be is making sure that we can control the Harry Kane Son kind of combination, even though it's a little bit of aging right there. But with our defenders right there, we can make sure that stops that from scoring.
Gally, were they right to get rid of the Lego-headed Italian manager that they had before?
My angry
controversy around them, or was that a good decision on their part?
My angry Uncle Antonio? Yeah. It was probably a good idea. I'll say this. This is why Spurs really do falter and fail, is that Daniel Levy has way too much power. Daniel Levy's in full control and believes it. And anytime, if you really look at what Levy's done in the last 2.5 seasons, basically since firing Pochettino, right? They make a terrible hire and Nuno. It doesn't work. They go from Nuno came after
Jose.
After Jose. So they fire Poch, this lovable guy, and you bring in Mourinho. Never going to work, right? We knew it's not going to work. He doesn't do the job. You fire Mourinho after he gets you to the League Cup final. You fire him on the eve of the final because you're deathly afraid he'll win you a freaking trophy and then you'll never be able to get rid of him, or he'll just fucking remind you for the rest of his life, with the tattoo of his freaking Spurs emblem. He'll have the little fucking Spursy back guy up on his arm with the trophy, holding it. Spurs' only trophy is on Jose Mourinho's shoulder. But they fire him. They bring in Nuno. That doesn't work, right? So you rip that up. You push all the eggs into the center of the table, all your chips in the center of the table in Conte. You hire his guy. You hire his sporting director. You bring in his players. You bring in every player designed to play in his system and his system only. And then you sack him. And we all know why he sacked him. He sacked him because the guy did everything but say, I slept with his wife. Like everything but. Right? And I think it probably would have been nicer if he had just said that.
Brian, it's just like we always say, it's almost a verb now to spurs something up. Like they're just serial bottlers but they really are spursing everything up right now, aren't they? They had it so good under Pochettino, and they just didn't seem to realize, at least at the board level.
Well, Jose is like the antithesis of a positive manager. I mean, he's like basically crushes every little bit of spirit that a side has. I mean, then you also taking and moving him. I mean, I think that that Nuno was probably just a little bit above. This is probably a little bit above his belt to go through, but I don't know. I think that the Conte hiring right there, it was questionable from the get go for me.
He's just, at some point you got to gamble. They went for a gamble. I mean, all Conte's done is win 2 or more trophies at every single stop he's ever had as a manager. And he usually wins in his first or second season because, well, the man knows he only has 2 or 3 seasons, because that you can just tell. He's not, you can't work with that man. Like that's not Carlo Ancelotti. You could sit down and like have a glass of wine, probably have a really good tactical conversation. I think Antonio Conte would literally smash the bottle, drink from the jagged edge, and like light 2 cigarettes off the other end of it, and the whole time be wafting his fake hair, his Lego helmet back and forth, and just like swearing at you in Italian, talking to you in 3 different languages, and probably hitting on your wife.
I think that just sounds like a Friday night in Dublin sometimes. But
if you can't tell, I might have grown up with an Italian uncle or 2.
But in terms of like the status quo right now, Brian, I think it's Simon Davis is interim manager for now. I couldn't make out who the coach was today. They might be a little bit confident because they came back against United, but then again, it is United, and it's not terribly difficult to come back against them sometimes. But with what we talked about at the beginning, with Trent's new role, with Gakpo's finding his feet, and it being at Anfield, are Spurs in for a hard time this weekend, or are we going to be biting our nails and peeking at the game from behind pillows, etc.?
I think that we are kind of in a season where we all been because they're biting nails and hiding behind pillows, and I think that's what we're probably going to keep on going right there, especially if we try to make this run. I mean, because I was there talking to my United coworker, and he's sitting there basically saying, oh, well, you have to win completely out for you. You can even come in there and catch up with us. So I'd like for us to catch them and all that. But I think that the rest of the season is going to be nail biting just to get us out, just to get us into that position. As long as we don't go to that conference league thing, that's the thing I'm worried about. I don't need to go all the way to Azerbaijan and across all of Eastern Europe and stuff like that on a Thursday night and then have to play on Sundays. That's just not going to be a good season.
Yeah, I'd agree. I really want to avoid the conference myself. I think we catch Spurs at a pretty good time. I got to say, you got to give them credit. After they got shellacked the way they did on the weekend and were embarrassed and then almost looked like it was going to happen again, the performance they put in the second half makes me know that 14-year-old boy, Ryan Mason, he's a motivator, because that little guy walked in there, put on his dad's jacket and stood up there in front of all those players and was like, Harry Kane, please help us. But he looked like a little kid, like he won, to steal a Kazi line. He literally looked like he won a Make-A-Wish moment, and it was I want to coach Spurs today, and they're like, okay, Ryan, you can coach Spurs today. But he got a reaction out of that. He got a reaction out of those guys, and I think he deserves an enormous amount of credit. I think the players deserve some credit, and like usual, United probably deserves some blame because they kind of rested on their laurels and they did what United does. Bruno missed a huge chance, whined his way through a half. When you have a captain like that, I'll show you a team that doesn't have a leader.
Yeah, that's Ryan Mason. That's who it was. I don't know what I thought it was Simon Davis, but yeah, I agree. He does look like this was his birthday present, and all the sports players patted him on the head on the way out to the game, and that's
they were like, "Hey, I don't know if you heard, but we got One Direction tickets. Hey, you want to go?"
And if they leave him there will be One Direction, and it won't be towards the top of the league. But that would be it for our show. I think that's a good note. Just a quick one, Brian. Score prediction for the weekend.
2-1 us.
Gally.
3-1, but it's not nearly that close.
I would agree with that, and I think that would be a good assessment. Quick threshold question then: Microsoft or Apple? Which is part of this podcast.
So, if the question is Microsoft or Apple, my question is, what is your equipment?
The way the other computer went, it's a Casio calculator from 1987.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going. If the reply is you have Microsoft, I am Apple. If that's Apple you're working with, I am Microsoft.
Oh, well, then I have Microsoft, so let's all got Apple computers for next week.
Got it.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap for today. The EPL show is on pretty much momentarily, anon, etc., with Gali. And is it the Polish Prince this week, Gali?
Yep, he's up with me. We'll be doing the fantasy preview, looking at little review of 33, looking into the big double game week 34. Maybe we'll look at our terrible standings and how bad I did, but probably not. We'll probably focus more on how poorly Matoush did.
I'm all the way down at the bottom, I'm sure of this, but I mean, touched the team since week 10. But Brian, thank you for joining us again this week. Gali, thank you for joining us. And everybody will see you soon. And for everybody else, enjoy the weekend. And then let's hope that our dial-up is working next Thursday for next Thursday. So, morning coffees tomorrow morning. And then we have the Monday show as usual on Monday. And as always, give that the auction a look. Give some donations. And let's help some people who desperately need help in areas of the world where they may not be able to access it readily. It just remains to say thank you very, very much to everybody and enjoy the night. Peace out.